combination of different factors. One would be coming from the data side, that along with our third co-author, Bruce Hardy at the London Business School, he and I have been pushing this idea of customer base analysis and really understanding your customer base at a deep, granular, rigorous level for quite some time. And we develop a lot of forecasting models and mathematical tools to help enable that. But it begins with an audit, with a kind of a formal, almost looking backwards at the customers before we look forwards and make forecasts. So part of it relates to the academic research, and part of it relates to a lot of the industry work that I've been doing. I've been writing other books on customer centricity, that not all customers are created equal. And if we understand the differences and leverage them, we can do very well for ourselves and our customers. But before we take that for granted, before we just believe that all customers are not created equal, we need to convince ourselves of that. And again, there's no better way to do that than a customer-based audit.
When you're in a business that's growing through customer acquisition and retention, if you don't have a really fundamental understanding of how that drives your growth, how much of your growth is coming from your existing customer base, and how many new customers you need to acquire to deliver on your business plan, you get into a world of pain. I've had a sort of 20-year journey of recognizing how critical it is to understand customer-based growth in these sort of customer-centric businesses. I think what then happened through COVID was that businesses that had historically thought in channels recognized that, you know what, channels that's not how customers think. Unless you start understanding how your customers behave, you really have very, very poor understanding of what's driving your long-term growth. And so I think the timing is fantastic, because as we come out of COVID, and really every customer-centric business on the planet is trying to understand, what does this sort of new reality look like? You have to look through the lens of the customer. Every business does some customer analysis. That's a sort of, truism. But what I see is missing is a really systematic, structured audit that is a set of foundational analyses to really leave nowhere to hide, to really understand at a very deep level how customers are behaving. The first one would be the customer cohort chart, the C3. And that really is I would say, the number one analysis. It highlights and breaks down, how does your revenue in each year build up from customers acquired in every previous period. It gives you a very clear view of to the extent to which your growth is being driven by your existing base versus new customer acquisition. Number two for me is looking at the distribution of customer value. When you look at a distribution of customer value, you will often see that a high value customer, what we call a top decile customer, can be worth 40, 50 times a low value customer. And the notion of an average customer may be mathematically true, but doesn't really exist in practice, or is extremely unrepresentative of a customer base. And that's a very, very powerful analysis, because it motivates a business to think about what are the decisions and actions that they're currently taking based on the idea of an average customer, whether that's marketing decisions, operational decisions, service decisions, etc. And how do you reorient decisions that are better aligned to customer value? And then I think the third analysis for me, and this is a hard one, I would probably go for the time between first and second purchase. And understanding the time between first and second purchase is incredibly helpful. It's a very good discipline to really understand, why do customers only buy once? How can we get them to come back, and how can we get them to come back faster? That drives a lot of very good behaviors.
Ultimately, we hope that this book will be a North Star for all industries, for all companies, to get them to do effectively the same kinds of analyses, so we can make more apples to apples comparisons across seemingly unrelated businesses. That's a real goal of ours. So managers can no longer say, well, ours is different. You can't compare us to anybody else. And what we've seen is a very different capabilities from one to another, whether it's because of tradition or whether it's because of just the data collection technology that they have at their fingertips. So, for instance, in the gaming industry, we know every game you played and how often and who with. So it's easy to look at some of those longitudinal slices for customers. Whereas in other settings, in consumer packaged goods, for instance, or maybe quick service restaurants, where it's easy to get just a one-time look to know just how many transactions were made, but hard to link them together over time for particular kinds of customers.
If you go into any business and say, who is the natural owner of this sort of customer analysis, it's typically the CMO. That's not a problem in and of itself, but what ends up happening is that a lot of this analysis, if it's done, firstly, it's done to solve marketing use cases rather than being more of a sort of used as more of a strategic unlock. And the opportunities to use it to change behavior goes way, way beyond what is in the marketing domain. It goes to how we think about profitability. How do we align channels? How do we align the service propositions, the operational experience, understanding which elements of products or categories are good for acquiring and retaining customers. The key to this is engaging a CEO, and that's challenging because CEOs' agendas are packed and there's lots of things competing to get onto their radar screen. A key to sort of change the conversation and change business behavior is to say, actually, how does this become part of a weekly conversation or a monthly conversation? And so for me, I think a key drive is how do you make this sort of customer conversation part of the regular cadence? Business I was talking to recently, they said, oh no, Michael, it is part of our trading pack. It's right at the end of our trading pack, and therefore we never get to it. And one of the actions was, well, let's put it at the front of the trading pack. Let's make it the first thing we talk about on a Monday morning, rather than in the appendix.
We're riding a longer term wave. Just in general, companies are becoming just more interested in what customers are doing and how they differ from each other and how they change over time. So there's been just overall a rising tide of a desire to understand customers and weave them into a variety of business decisions. But in particular, there's just a real focus on value these days. So whether it's within the company or outside investors or other stakeholders, want to know what kind of ROI they're getting on different kinds of marketing activities, product development, partnerships, channel strategies, and so on. And so be able to point to how much more we're able to get out of our customers. Are they staying with us longer? Are they buying more often? Are they spending more when they do? These kinds of questions are coming front and center. And that idea of looking at a group of customers now versus, say, last period, whether that's a quarter or a year ago, that itself is one of the lenses. So whether we want to evaluate the impact of a pandemic or a holiday season or a potential recession, we got that covered.
Many businesses are asking these questions. How are customers behaving? How is that behavior changing? And what we often see is there's a sort of, should we say, a go-to segmentation. There's typically maybe a sort of a persona segmentation. Let's look at our young mothers or our sort of older customers as a segment. And the challenge I see with that approach is that those segments are by definition a bit vague. The membership of segments changes over time, and you end up with incredibly confusing and complex analysis to understand, well, is it this segment that is performing less well, or is the membership of the segment changing? We believe very firmly that there's something foundational about cohorts. And when we say cohort, we mean a group of customers that were acquired in a period. So whether that's a monthly cohort or a quarterly or an annual cohort, the 2021 cohort was a group of customers who made their first purchase in 2021. And what's powerful about a cohort is the membership of that group never changes. Once you're in a cohort, you're always in that cohort. And therefore you can track the behavior of that cohort over time and understand, is it growing? Is it declining? Is the rate of decline increasing? And not only is the sort of membership immutable, but if you look at the entire customer base, every customer is in a cohort and the cohorts completely cover the customer base. And for me, that makes it a very compelling and powerful way to answer these sort of questions about customer behavior. It's not that demographics and persona-led segments aren't helpful, but they, for me, are sort of at a different level to a cohort analysis, which I would say is foundational.
Don't relegate the customer analyses to someone who's a level or two down. You, as the CEO, need to care, need to dig in, need to be held accountable for the behavior of your customers. It just hasn't been that way. The customer really is your most important asset, whether it's showing up on the balance sheet or not. Understand those customers, again, at a deep, granular level. Look at them through these different kinds of lenses, and you'll see your business very, very differently.
If we take anything from what's happened over the last few months, it's the primacy of really understanding profitability. Acquiring customers at any cost and keeping them happy at any cost is not a long-term recipe for success. And therefore, truly understanding how do you build a sustainable growth plan based on cost-effective acquisition of customers and then cost-effective retention of customers, really, for us, is absolutely key. The P&L of the individual customer, that is the sort of new unit of analysis for every business.
It's fascinating to see just how different products are when we look at them through the lens of customers. Instead of saying which products do we sell the most of, to say which products are disproportionately appealing to the customers who have been with us the longest and buy most often. And there's not a one-to-one match over there. There are some products that might be relatively small, but are uniquely appealing to those customers who appear to be the most valuable. So once we start looking at the actions we take, whether it's products, channels, other kinds of activities, through this lens of customer value, it gives us a lot of strong advice about how we go about managing and developing products and again, other tactical elements.
The data set that we started off with is amazingly simple. It's a list of transactions with a date and an amount and a product ID. What surprised me is two things. Firstly, just how many analyses it's possible to do with that sort of data. I like to think of myself as pretty analytical. I like to think I'm good at this sort of thing, but I was genuinely blown away by just how much it's possible to squeeze out of these sorts of data sets. We're not doing sophisticated machine learning and artificial intelligence, quite the opposite. What we are doing is a set of descriptive analyses. But it's amazing, again, how complex some of these things are in practice. I look back and think, wow, this is stuff that I wished I'd known 25 years ago. It all seems pretty obvious when it's in the book, but it really isn't.